Hello everyone and welcome to another Gabbing Gamer Geeks. I am your favorite video game bounty hunter and host, Rontro aka Bro Han Solo, alongside your co-host, Retromageddon aka Broby-Wan Kenobi, and we are collectively known as the Retro Bros. How are we doing this evening, Retromageddon?
It's good to be back, Bropolian Dynamite.
Nice one. That's a new one.
I've been saving it.
It's a good one. So tonight we have another discussion, and the discussion tonight is about mine and your favorite console. And I'm going to hand it over to you and let you tell everybody your favorite and why.
Okay, so yeah, mine is the PlayStation 2. And I think people might be a little bit surprised by that, if anyone watches my channel, because all I've done so far is like a little bit of PlayStation, NES, Super NES, and Sega Genesis. So I haven't touched it yet, but that is my favorite console. It really had a little bit of everything. You know, it was kind of like a convergence between the new school and old school. You had stuff like net play, online play, I don't know what you want to call it.
Right.
It was something else with net play, actually. Anyway, you had this, you know, you had that, but you didn't have like the huge OS that like the Xbox 360 has, and updates and all that stuff. It had the nice graphics, you know, so it was a great combination of things. It was a great time in gaming for me, and had some of my favorite games on it. You know, God of War, you had Battlefront. Like, I can't tell you how much time I spent to it. It was ridiculous. And, you know, going online with that game, you know, it was still kind of a novelty, even though I played PC games that you could go online with. You know, to have a controller in your hand and be sitting in front of your TV, you know, it was a new thing.
Right, and it really was. One of the things I really enjoyed about the PS2, I enjoy the PS2. That is not my favorite console, but that was actually my first delve into MMOs. I started off with EverQuest Online Adventures, and I played that for a while. I really enjoyed it until Final Fantasy XI came along, and I mean, I spent so much time on that, and that's what really started getting me into the MMOs. And one of the other things I really enjoyed about the PS2 was they had a lot of collection discs, like the Capcom Classics. They had Sega collections. They had Sonic collections. You know, the PS2 was really big on collections. And that's one of the things I really liked about that console, being the retro gamer that I am.
Oh yeah, and you had the whole PlayStation library as well.
Yes.
You know, nowadays it's like they're a little reluctant to give that backwards compatibility support.
Well, Xbox is getting a little more comfortable with it.
Yeah, something has changed a bit, and you know, that was nice though.
It was.
You could just, you know, hold on to your old system. But I don't remember though. Did it take? I think you still need the memory, so if I remember correctly.
Yeah, you still needed the PS1 memory cards, but otherwise, you know, you just pop that disc in and you were good to go. And you know, just to touch on a few of my other favorite PS2 games, like I like the Dark Cloud series. I wish that wouldn't have disappeared. I still actually own both Dark Clouds. Probably my biggest collection is my PS2 collection, surprisingly. The Jak and Daxter games were awesome. I love the God of Wars. They were excellent. But you know, there was a lot of great stuff on the PS2.
Oh yeah, Metal Gear 3.
Oh, the Metal Gear Solid
3.
Yeah, that was an excellent game. I mean, I think they kind of botched it with Metal Gear Solid 2. I mean, I loved Metal Gear Solid 2, don't get me wrong, but the protagonist was just, oh, and the story was so confusing. I mean, I still don't quite understand it to this day, but
yeah, it was almost like he was just kind of having, I don't want to say a joke, but it was approached very humorously.
It was.
I'll put it that way.
And we'll have to touch on that in another discussion. Maybe we'll have to have a Metal Gear discussion, because there's a lot to talk about when it comes to Metal Gear. Anything else you'd like to say about the PlayStation 2?
Yeah, well, let's see. My favorite series, Monster Hunter, got its start.
Oh yeah.
And, you know, that's one of the things that was really nice about it, is that you would see a lot of games that were kind of different. And you don't see that a whole lot anymore.
It is very hard to be original these days.
Yeah, it's a risk when you have that. There was some game, I forget what it was. I was reading about, like something like $100 million budget.
Wow.
It's scary to try to even take a risk with that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's that many games out there that have reached $100 million in sales.
Yeah. I'd have to see what it is, but crazy.
Yeah, the PS2, like you said, it opened up a whole new world for gaming. It really did. There is so much original content, and as I said, it's kind of hard to be original today. But the PS2 was really able to do that. We kind of seen the early start of Dark Souls games with Shadow of the Colossus. If you really look at it, they do have a lot of similarities, and I think that's what really brought about the Dark Souls games and Demon Souls, and I think they have another one in the series with with an off name that's not Demon Souls or Dark Souls. I can't recall the name right now. But
there's Bloodborne, but I know that
Bloodborne.
Really, yeah, I don't know if it was part of the series, but maybe by the group.
Yeah, I don't know if he intended it to be a part of the series, but I mean, obviously Bloodborne is a lot like the Dark Souls series.
And I do stand corrected. I just checked up on myself. They were talking about Star Citizen having maybe approaching $100 million. But usually it's like around 30, 40 is like the upper range for production costs. So I stand corrected, but still, that's a lot of money.
It is, and you know what? I don't even think I've ever heard of that one.
It's supposed to be like EVE Online, which is space MMO.
Right. And speaking of originality, that brings me to the point of another game known as Katamari.
Oh yeah, they were awesome.
They were definitely very unique. Who thought, rolling around a big ball of trash could actually be fun?
Yeah, definitely. I remember I didn't think much of it. Someone showed it to me. I didn't play it very long because I never bought it, but it was just fun to run around and do that. And that brings me to another game that I really liked, was Sky Odyssey for the PlayStation 2. And it was really unusual in that it was a flight sim, but it wasn't like the usual combat thing. You were actually searching for this lost, it was like this lost land or something. I don't really remember it too well. I don't want to put any spoilers in because I do know what it was. I just don't want to tell people in case they play it.
Right.
But you're searching for this place. You have to find map pieces. And you have several planes you can choose from, and the whole point of the game is to try to navigate dangerous areas and stuff. And they had some really creative scenarios where you had to fly through mountain passes or try to refuel on the train, and all kinds of weird stuff.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard of that one. I might have to give that one a look for sure.
Yeah, it's worth checking out.
And that brings me to my favorite console of all time, and this shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. I have mentioned it before in at least one of my videos. The Nintendo, the original, is definitely my all-time favorite console. And I want to actually tell kind of a funny story about the Nintendo to get this started. I mean, I love this console a lot, and it was around the time of the Super Nintendo. It was probably a couple years before the N64 was about to come out, and I actually took my Super Nintendo and I had every intentions on actually trading it in for a Sega, as crazy as that is. Because, you know, all the games that I had for the Super Nintendo, I had beaten multiple times, and I was like, you know, I want something different. And I was like, well, you know, I'll take this in, get a Sega, and this was at a place called Leo's, which I've mentioned in a couple of my reviews. And I was, you know, I took it in, and he didn't have any Segas. And I was kind of bummed out. And I had noticed that he had a couple NESs laying around, and I knew my dad was going to be furious about this. But, I mean, he wasn't even playing the Super anymore at this point, so, you know, I didn't think of it as much of a big deal. My dad didn't start picking up gaming again, really, until the PlayStation 1 and the N64. But I traded it for the NES, because when the NES was first out, I wasn't really playing video games too much. My dad played the video games. I pretty much just sat and watched him play. So I ended up trading in my Super Nintendo for a Nintendo. I downgraded because I didn't truly get to experience the Nintendo. So, you know, I traded it in, and the guy would, depending on the game, he'd give me 1 to 2 games per cartridge for the Super Nintendo. So, I mean, I made out in the end as far as the amount of games I had at this point. And, you know, I tend to trade them for games that I remembered from my dad playing. And, you know, got the thing home, and, you know, for days upon days, I played all these games. I watched my dad play. Funny thing about the Nintendo is, it's honestly a surprise that it caught on. Around that time, you know, you had the video game market crash of '83, and it seemed like gaming as we knew it was about to no longer exist. The Nintendo brought that back. And, you know, without the Nintendo, I feel that, you know, we may not have console gaming, or it just might not be what it is today. I mean, it took longer to catch on again. I mean, I think we still would have had PC gaming. We would have still had the arcades. And you know, console gaming's kind of phased out arcades nowadays. That you'll find them few and far between. But
and they're often not of the quality of the.
No.
You know, in the '90s, you'd still walk into an arcade and go, "Wow, look at that."
Yeah, especially when it came to fighting games like Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat. You know, I remember being that little kid going into the arcade because my mom knew a guy that actually owned an arcade, and it was an arcade/sandwich shop. And, you know, I ended up spending a lot of time there because, you know, my mom would go there and kind of just hang out over at the sandwich shop because she knew the people that owned it. So I spent a lot of time in that arcade, and I was just this little kid watching people play Mortal Kombat, you know, like, wow, I want to play that, you know. And, you know, actually the funny thing is, Aliens vs. Predator, I remember going in that arcade with my best friend, and we dropped $20 on just that machine to beat Aliens vs. Predator. And
well, I remember doing that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, but you know,
Turtles in Time is my.
Turtles in Time is an awesome game. But back to the Nintendo, as I said, you know, it's really because of that system we are where we are today with console gaming. And I mean, just the amount of awesome games that were on that, the Ninja Gaiden games, Double Dragon. So, you know, at that time it really felt like the arcades were coming into the home. I mean, with games like Russian Attack, Turtles 2, the arcade game. I mean, come on, it says right in the title.
Yeah, it was excellent.
And it was.
Much better than the first one.
Oh yeah. See, I love the first one. I mean, it does get a lot of crap, and I can understand why it gets a lot of crap because it didn't have too many enemies from the show. I mean, you had the bosses were usually something from the show, but the actual, you know, enemies throughout the levels. I mean, you had a foot soldier here and there and some mousers, but then you had these things that looked like weird leg-looking things, and you had the guy with the chainsaw and stuff. But yeah, that game does get a lot of crap. But I really enjoy that game, honestly. And
Oh yeah, and it seemed like it was like people didn't really understand how to play it because you kind of had to switch them out, the turtles, to survive.
Right, you did too, and there was points in the game where it was really hard to figure out where you needed to go. But that was kind of the appeal of it. It almost felt like you were in an open world type of game, and you didn't have too many open world games in them days. Most games went from left to right.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, as I was saying, the NES just had an excellent library of games that were really enjoyable, and it really pulled console gaming out of the abyss and made it relevant again. Because as I said, not just Atari, I'm not going to put that all on Atari, because Atari wasn't the only console at the time. You had like the ColecoVision, and you had the Intellivision, and you just had so many different consoles, and on every single one of them consoles, what one console had, another console had, and sometimes the other console got a complete garbage version of it, and everything was being so mass produced, and that nobody was monitoring that stuff, and that's what killed it. But that's where and Nintendo gets a lot of crap for the way they did things at the time, because they limited companies to so many games a year. I mean, you had Konami. Let's just use Konami as an example. You had Konami, and then you had Ultra Games, which was Konami but under another name. That way Konami could bring out more games for that year. It was really weird how they did things, but it kept from so much trash being put out on the market again.
Yeah, shovelware.
Yes,
As they like to call it.
and so if not for the Nintendo, as I said, we wouldn't have console gaming, or it wouldn't be what it is now. It would have took longer to catch on, and that's what really makes it my favorite console. I mean, a lot of it has to do with nostalgia, I'll be completely honest. Being back, when I was 3, 4, 5 years old, sitting on the couch watching my dad play these awesome games, and I mean, that's a lot of what it is. It's just mostly nostalgia, but at the same time, the Nintendo really did a lot for the industry at that time, because like I said, it brought the console market from out of the abyss and made it relevant again. I know I'm repeating myself, but I really think that needs to be hammered in there.
I did want to say there is a lot you can discover on the Nintendo.
Oh yeah.
There's so many games I've never heard of that I've put in, and it's like, this is kind of cool. Like, they often point to like the bad games.
Right, they do.
There are a lot of pretty good games that weren't, you just didn't know about them. I mean, I know about Mario, Castlevania,
Right.
Mega Man, and a few others.
Everybody knows those. Legend of Zelda.
Zelda.
Metroid.
I didn't know about like Shatterhand. Who knew about that game? I didn't.
No, I didn't either.
There's a lot of good stuff out there on the Nintendo that we just didn't know about.
Hidden gems.
Yeah.
And the reason behind that is Super Nintendo was on its way out, or it was out, and obviously the previous generation consoles, and it's even this way today, to this day, they still develop for the last generation for a little while before they finally scrap it. And a lot of times people end up missing some games because they're like, okay, something's new out, we're moving to that. That is not important to me anymore. A lot of people just took their consoles in and their games and traded them in to get so much off of the next console. And it really does suck, because there are a lot of really good games that people didn't know about because they moved on. And at that point in a console's life, whenever the next console's out and that one's slowly fading out, people really know how the hardware works now. So they're able to push those consoles to their limits at that point. Almost like Shatterhand, for instance, since you brought it out, it almost could have been on the Super Nintendo.
It had a lot of elements that you would later see in
Yes.
Super Nintendo games. And it's interesting, even though they limited the number of games these companies could put out, there was still something like 600 North American releases for the NES. So, how much could you buy and play?
Oh,
So there's
absolutely.
that as well.
That is true. I mean, games weren't exactly cheap in them days.
No, what was it, like 50, 60 bucks for a game?
It
It's probably closer to 100
Some of
in
them,
today's money.
some of them were actually that expensive, though. I believe. I mean, some of them got up there in price.
Yeah, there was that one, I don't know if it was Genesis or 32X, and I don't want to commit because I already messed up today and threw out a number that was totally wrong. But yeah, there was a Sega game that was quite expensive because of all the chips and stuff they had in it.
Right, and you know what? Another game, for instance, for the Super Nintendo was Earthbound. And, I mean, there was a reason it was expensive when it first came out. It wasn't just the game you got. You got this humongous box, you got a guide, and, it's understandable why it was expensive as it was.
Scratch and sniff stickers.
I remember those. I remember sitting at my buddy's house because he had it, my best friend, George, which you'll probably hear me talk about a lot in reviews and discussions. But he had, that guide in that game, and I remember just sitting there watching him play Earthbound and continuously sniffing these stickers, especially the banana one because it smelled so damn good. And then you had a stinky sneaker. I mean, who does this?
Yeah, I think there's one that was like moldy pizza or something. That was
yeah.
like the first one I hit.
But like I said, thank God for Nintendo, thank God for the NES, because, I mean, we really got something incredible these days. I mean, console gaming has morphed into something else, and that just brings me on to the current state of console gaming. And I just want to start out with, the current gen is the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4. And they're already planning, I mean, it's still Xbox One and PS4, but now they want to make upgraded versions of them, like literally make them more advanced. I want to kind of get your thoughts on that before I give mine.
If I had bought one of them when they came out, I would not be happy about that. Unless they're giving me a free upgrade.
I'd have to agree there.
I don't know the details on it, though. But I wouldn't be happy at all.
Yeah, I don't know the specifics myself on it. I haven't researched it much. But I being around YouTube and watching videos and stuff and just hearing about it, I'm in agreement. If I had bought one of those, I would be pretty miffed. I mean, those consoles weren't cheap. The Xbox One when it first came out was like $500?
Yeah.
And then to turn around and then go and make another console that's more powerful, still calling it the Xbox One, what it is to me, it seems, is like a money-making scheme. And, I'm not going to say that this is the first time this has happened, because obviously it's not. Look at Nintendo handhelds.
Oh, yeah.
The DS especially. It had so many incarnations. I mean, you had the DS, and then you had the DS Lite, and then you had the DSi, then you had the DSi XL. It wasn't that the systems were more powerful, because they weren't. They were still all the same thing, but they upgraded it to, because if you remember the original DS, the screen was kind of dark and stuff.
Yeah, it could have used the upgrade in that.
Yeah,
that situation.
Absolutely. And the DSi, the DS Lite is what fixed that. And then came the DSi, and we got pretty cameras on it now, and we have an eShop for you to buy things and make more money off you. And then XL, larger screens. It's kind of taken that same concept, but now putting it into console gaming, and I think that is kind of bad for console gaming. I think it's really honestly going to hurt console gaming.
Yeah, ultimately it will, because how long are people going to keep opening their wallets up on a single game?
Exactly. And, you know, a lot of people were saying we're headed for another video game market crash. And you know what? I don't think it's too far off from being possible, because when you look at, like I said, Xbox One and PS4, they're kind of doing the same thing that they did in the past. Like, you know, the Atari had how many different incarnations, how many different upgrades, you know, and all the other consoles followed suit in those days. It just feels like history is repeating itself.
Yeah, I'm reluctantly inclined to agree with you, because there are so many forces working on the industry in collusion with that it does seem like, you know, it cannot be sustained in the current course that it's on. It's not only that, you have, you know, they call it convergence, where you have, you know, all these devices are becoming more similar. As, you know, consoles are becoming more like PCs.
Right.
And you have tablets, you have mobile, and of course they're simultaneously competing with the consoles.
Right. And, you know, it's funny that you mentioned that, because it's some of the bigger video game companies. And, you know, I've talked about this before, about Konami and Capcom. They seem to want to go in the way of mobile gaming. Like, they seem to slowly be phasing out their console base, and seem to want to... I haven't really seen anything on any mobile devices yet from Konami or Capcom, but one of them, I believe it was Capcom, actually said, and it could have been Konami, you know, don't quote me on this, but I know it was one of those two companies said that mobile gaming is the future of gaming. And I do not agree.
Yeah, I think it was possibly Konami. I don't want to be 100%, but I think it was. Is it? It's, you know, that's hard to say, because it really depends on how they're pushing the technology. And, you know, that once again you go into technology. What is it, Moore's Law, where they said that you can just keep making components smaller? Well, now we're finding we're coming at, you know, a wall there. You know, how much smaller can we make this stuff?
Right.
So, you know, eventually, you know, our PC is going to start getting bigger as we start stacking, you know, CPUs and, you know, all that stuff. So, is it the future? It's, you know, so much of it is dependent upon what's possible with the technology. And if someone can make a machine that performs better than your mobile market, if they can't keep up with that, what's going to happen to it? I don't think it would go away, but I don't think people would look at it as the cutting edge. I don't think people look at it like that now.
No, I don't believe so either. I mean, yeah, it's nice to have games on the go. It really is. Handhelds really started that whole thing, you know, the Game Boy. That's really where, you know, that all started. And I mean, now we, like I said, we got these tablets in our phones, and, you know, we could play games on them now and stuff like that. And I mean, to me, those games on them handhelds, not handhelds, but the tablets and the phones, you know, a lot of them are just cash cows, because, you know, people are constantly just throwing money at them. Ooh, I gotta get that. I gotta get that. I gotta get that. You know, they're constantly throwing money at them, and I think that's kind of why they said that was the future of gaming, because there is a lot of money to be made there, and there are a lot of people out there willing to throw money and get instant gratification.
Oh yeah, and if you look at the quality of some of those games, the budgets on them must be tremendously low. It must be a fraction of what it takes to make a console game. So the incentive for the companies is very high.
Oh yeah, the profits are large. It can't be no more than a couple $100,000 to make a mobile game.
Yeah, I would agree. And if you look at a lot of the mobile games I get are like kind of like indie games, and they're usually free or they're cheap, and they don't have that cash shop element. But they're made by maybe a few people, and there's not a whole lot of difference between them and the other end of that equation. What we're talking about with Konami and stuff. Like, I just don't see a big difference in the quality. In fact, some of those games are better.
Agreed.
Because they don't have that element in them.
But just the state of console gaming these days, I'm kind of really worried about it. I don't want to see console gaming phase out. But that's my preferred gaming method, is consoles. I've never really been big on PC. There's very few PC games I've ever played. Outside of Diablo, StarCraft, World of Warcraft. If you notice, I named all Blizzard games. Outside of them, I haven't really played too much PC gaming. I'm starting to get into a little bit more of it now that I'm doing the YouTube channel. Like, I started doing a Let's Play of Shovel Knight. I started live streaming Undertale. But, those don't seem like PC games. Those seem like games that should have came from our childhood. Should have been on the Nintendo or the Super Nintendo. And I guess that's kind of why I have that, it has that appeal to me, because it does seem like the old console gaming. But, really, I've never been much of a PC gamer. I've tried getting into the mobile games. I mean, I find one that'll keep my interest here and there, but then eventually my interest fades on them. What doesn't fade is my interest in console gaming. That's never gone away. I mean, yeah, I like the old school games, but at the same time, I like the newer stuff too, because of where gaming's going.
Yeah, and that's another thing that affects it, because in the past we had a lot of pioneers. You had, Howard Scott Warshaw. You had Miyamoto, Kojima, Richard Garriott, if I pronounced his name correctly, I hope I did, but the guy who did the Ultima games. You had all these people who were really just blazing these new trails, and they're getting older, they're dropping out of the business, or sometimes being pushed out.
Yeah, Kojima, Keiji Inafune, I mean, just to name two of them, two of the biggest. And the thing is, they're still there, they're just not with, Kojima being with Konami, and Keiji Inafune being with Capcom. They're off. Keiji Inafune's doing his own thing now. Kojima is now with Sony. But yeah, the video game industry on a whole really is changing. For now, it's hard to tell if it's for the better or the worst.
Yeah, and with the talent, with the people who make the games, you're talking about stuff like Shovel Knight. It's almost like the people who are really passionate about making games are just saying, well, why do I want to work for these companies? Why don't I just make my own game? My brother-in-law is a programmer. I don't even know what he programs. It's boring. But he's working on a game with his friends. And he, with his grades and his background, he could have probably gotten into one of those companies. So it really makes you wonder what's going to happen.
That brings me to think, also that indie games are the future of the video game industry.
It's possible, especially when you look at these engines they have now. Like, almost anyone can make a game. Is it of the same quality? Is it can it do everything that, a game where you make your own source code can? Well, that's another question, but it's becoming more available to people, and you can have different viewpoints, different approaches to gaming.
And it's funny that you mentioned that, it's getting easier these days for anyone to make a game, because I was big on, here a couple years ago, I was actually working on making my own RPG with RPG Maker VX, I believe it was. And, it really is simple for just about anyone to make a game. Whether it be through that or other means. I mean, there's websites out there dedicated to being able to make your own game as well.
Yeah, Stack Exchange, you can learn how to code and all that. And you can even insert your own code into those engines.
Yes.
Get them to do what you want them to do.
Absolutely, providing you have the knowledge to code. But, it's very easy to learn how to code without even going to school these days. The information's all out there to be found. And, that's really where I think gaming's going in general. I mean, I know this was supposed to be a discussion about console gaming, but you can't just talk about console gaming without mentioning other gaming sources.
Yeah, well, it does come into play because we're seeing these indie games that are just, they blow up.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That's something that's unheard of. We would not have imagined back in, 1989.
No, absolutely not.
Got a piece of plastic at a store with some silicone in it, and you didn't know where it came from. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's very true. And it's funny because, even when you beat a video game and you've seen the credits back in the Nintendo days, you really didn't see a real name. It might have been a nickname or something that they went by or something.
I think Mega Man, they did that.
Yeah.
Mega Man 2, they had a lot of nicknames, yeah.
Yeah, and it's there was something behind that. I don't know if it was on Nintendo's end or if it was on Capcom's end or whatever, but they didn't want them to put their real names out there to take credit for whatever reason.
Strange. I have to look into that. I'm curious about that.
But yeah, and nowadays, it's like, well, everybody knows who these people are now, and they're recognizable people now, as opposed to then, because none of them were recognizable then. Nobody, outside of maybe Shigeru Miyamoto, I mean, I didn't even know who he was as a kid, but, there was people out there who knew who he was. But, people didn't. If you would have been like, oh, did you see Keiji Inafune's latest game? They would have been like, who the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, nowadays you say, hey, did you see Keiji Inafune's latest game? And they'll be like, oh, you mean the guy that created Mega Man?
Yeah, exactly.
But when it comes down to it, my final conclusion is, I really do think that console gaming is headed for a rapid decline here within the next couple years. I hate to say that, but with the current practices of PlayStation and Xbox, it seems like they're repeating history again, and I think that we are going to see a decline in console gaming and probably more of an increase in PC gaming and mobile gaming.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think, I don't know if I think decline's a good word. I don't know if I'd use the word crash, but a crisis might also work.
Right.
And, just like in the past, when you had Atari and all those companies collapsed, you did have people like Miyamoto and Garriott, quietly working on their games. I don't know when they started on Mario, but it couldn't have been that long after, really, because Crash was 83.
Yeah, and I believe
85.
85.
And they had the arcade game.
Yes. Absolutely, and I mean, you had Donkey Kong come out in the arcades. I mean, Nintendo didn't start when the NES started. Nintendo is actually a very old company. They go back actually a couple hundred years. They started as a company that made handcrafted playing cards. And that's where Nintendo started, believe it or not. And then it morphed into what it is today. And it's great that we got the opportunity to have Miyamoto kind of give the console market CPR. And right when like I said, when it comes down to it, especially with these indie developers out there, yes, you're seeing, like, I'm going to use Shovel Knight as an example again, just because it's such a big popular game currently. It started on PC, but look where it is now. You have a Wii U version, you have a PlayStation 4 version, you have, I believe, an Xbox One version, and each version has something different about it. The PS4, you can unlock Kratos as a playable character.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
I don't know if what the Xbox's exclusive is. I can't recall. I'm not sure if the Wii U has an exclusive character, but they're bringing multiplayer to Shovel Knight on the Wii U.
Yeah, and it does seem like there is an attempt on part of the consoles to try to pick up on that. They do kind of host indie games. I remember first I heard of Minecraft was because it was on 360.
Right. I had heard about Minecraft, but it never caught my interest until it came to consoles.
Yeah. So that is another aspect. It's another wrinkle. Maybe that will help them a bit. Who knows?
At the same time, it could hurt because you have the alternative of playing them games on PC, especially with Steam being out there. Steam's something huge when it comes to PC gaming. Any game there is out there to have, you can pretty much almost get all of them on Steam. I mean, yeah, you have your exclusives on consoles and stuff, but the games that aren't exclusive, it seems like they're on both console and PC, and it's usually through Steam.
Definitely. And weren't they trying to work on their own console? I think they might have launched it. I'm not sure.
I heard about a console. They were working on something like that. Was it called the Steam Box or something like that?
I think that's what it was. Yes.
But I don't know whatever happened to that. I never really paid too much attention to that. I'm not big on playing games on Steam. I have enough consoles as it is to keep getting games for, and have to go to the PC and buy even more games. I mean, I'll get a couple here and there just so I can cover them on my channel, but other than that, it's just like, I'm going to stick with my consoles. And if consoles ever do phase out, I won't quit gaming. I won't say that. But I won't play the latest, greatest games. I'll continue to play my consoles till the day they no longer work.
Yeah, I still have a lot of mine. I mostly play stuff on PC, but it's because, like what I do. It's easier to get the footage when I'm just grabbing it off the PC.
Absolutely.
There's consoles are still there.
And I hope that consoles continue to be there. It really, really, again, going back to my favorite console, you have to thank Nintendo for what we have now.
Yes. And that's, we might even see if there is some kind of crash. You never know, there might be another Nintendo.
Wouldn't that be awesome? Wouldn't that be awesome? Because I'll tell you what, it was a time to be innovative. It really was.
Oh yeah, and they did it. There's so many weird games out there from that era that are just mashups. They're just doing whatever they wanted to.
Yep.
Sometimes it worked.
And sometimes it failed horribly.
Yeah.
But I think that just about wraps up this conversation, this discussion. It is getting kind of long-winded. I think we're repeating a few things here and there, but at the same time, it's okay for us to repeat those things. It's really important points. If we're repeating it, it's important. You should know that. That those things that we've repeated should be in your head, and I want to hammer it home, pretty much. And yeah, so I'm Rontro, Brohan Solo, alongside my co-host,
Retromageddon, aka Broby-Wan Kenobi.
And we will see you next time for another Gabbing Gamer Geeks. Game on!